What up? So a few weeks ago, I was talking to one of my sisters about the phrase, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, whether you believe that phrase is true or not is probably largely based on your well of personal experiences, and I'm not here to argue in support of or against those. What I think we can all agree on, though, is that there are tunnels and that we're all constantly going in and out of them. Right? I think it's fair to assume that every person on this planet has experienced or will experience pain in some capacity. Hence, they have gone through or will go through a tunnel at some point. And that's what made me want to make this video. The fact that we have no choice but to go through these tunnels. Like, why can't we avoid them? Literally every decision I make is made with the intention to avoid pain and strife, and yet those very decisions lead me directly to those feelings, directly into these tunnels. And so I think it's fair to conclude that these tunnels are simply a fact of life, and that bothers me to no extent. The reason my sister and I were talking about tunnels in the first place is because she was telling me about a vacation she recently took where everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and she basically had to spend her entire vacation putting out fires. And as she was telling me this story, I was getting angry for her. You have to understand, my sister has kids and she works 70+ hour weeks in one of the most hectic environments you could imagine. And this vacation was a chance for her to finally get some time for herself and her family, but instead of getting to relax, she basically just had to keep doing her job, but in a different city. And so I was feeling resentment towards whatever powers that may be that made this her reality. It just seems cruel to put someone through this. But here's the thing. My sister wasn't angry or resentful. She was laughing. She was telling this story with a smile on her face. And what's more amazing, she somehow managed to maintain that happiness and composure while she was going through this tumultuous experience. That is to say, my sister managed to avoid feelings of anger and resentment while she was going through this tunnel, while she was experiencing pain and strife. And I think that's why this conversation really stuck with me, because I can't do that. I don't have the ability to not get angry at my situation when things aren't going well. I've only just started to learn how to not quit on things when I get into one of these tunnels. But even as I move through them, I am constantly frustrated by the fact that I'm even in one. Like I said, everything I do to avoid these tunnels. So when I get caught in one, I immediately resort to anger. But talking to my sister made me realize that I definitely want to be able to avoid doing that. I want to be able to go through these tunnels without resorting to anger, resentment, apathy, disillusionment, and every other negative emotion that I allow to control me. And the reason I want to avoid these negative feelings is because they start to reverberate outwards and affect certain aspects of my life. For example, the coping mechanisms that I employ become more and more harmful the angrier I get. I'll stop exercising, start eating junk food, dedicate less time to making these videos, etc. I don't really want to go too deep into this right now. I'll probably talk more about this in a different video, but the reason I am where I am in my life is because I got into this cycle where I would realize that I'm in a tunnel and I would resort to extremely harmful coping mechanisms, much more intense than the ones I just outlined. And these coping mechanisms would completely derail me for months and sometimes years at a time. So avoiding any type of harmful coping mechanism is extremely important to me, which is why I want to learn to be like my sister and not allow feelings like anger and resentment to control my decision-making process. Another reason I want to avoid these feelings is because they start to affect how I interact with the world around me. When I'm going through these tunnels, I'm not as willing to engage with people, which translates to me not being physically or emotionally available for my friends and family. I shut down and I isolate. If they want to hang out, I'll look for excuses not to go. If they need help, I'll be the last to offer. I mean, to my friends and family, I must come off as borderline bipolar, because depending on whether or not I'm going through one of these tunnels, you're either gonna get hyper-social fief or anti-social fief. My sister, though, is the epitome of consistency. Doesn't matter if the world is literally on her shoulders. If you need her, she's there. A couple of months ago, we had an incident go down in the middle of the night that required her expertise. Now remember, this woman has kids and an extremely demanding job, but despite that, she still drove the almost 1 hour in the middle of the night to our house to handle the situation. I'm sorry, but that's on some superhero stuff. It's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's just my sister being herself. All I'm saying is that if you put me in that situation, I'll probably still come through because you're my friend and you need help, but I will be angry about it. and I won't be able to hide it. And that anger will seep into and affect other parts of my life. And the last reason I want to avoid anger and resentment is the simplest one. I think the more time I spend being angry about the situation, the less time I spend fixing it. I think if I could spend less time resenting the fact that things aren't going well, I could spend more time devising a solution to rectify the situation. So ultimately, I think it's really important for me to learn how to get through these tunnels without resorting to anger and resentment, because that will, 1, help me to avoid harmful coping mechanisms that jeopardize my personal progress. 2, allow me to be the person that I want to be, not just when things are going well, but also when I'm going through these tunnels. And 3, spend less time in these tunnels. So the question then becomes, okay, so how do I do this? How do I avoid resorting to anger, resentment, and all of these negative emotions? And to be frank, I can't say that I know, but what I can do is point to a specific difference between how I approach these tunnels and how my sister does. So I'll just start there. Remember at the beginning of the video where I said everything I do to avoid these tunnels? Well, I think that's one of my mistakes. When I was initially talking with my sister, I expressed to her how frustrating it is to find yourself in one of these tunnels when you've meticulously dedicated all of your energy to avoiding them. And I think that's where the anger stems from. Trying to avoid the inevitable. As I mentioned in the beginning, I think most people would agree that these tunnels are simply a fact of life, so why am I trying to avoid them? I may as well try to fight the wind or stop the sun from coming up. And so I think I need to shift my focus from avoidance to acceptance. My sister never articulated this, so I don't want to put words in her mouth, but if I had to guess, I'd say that this is at least a part of the approach that she takes. I'd say that she's accepted that these tunnels are an inevitability, and by not trying to fight or avoid them, her focus naturally shifts towards how she can effectively deal with and move past them, which completely bypasses the frustration of getting caught in them in the first place, which is precisely where I get stuck. When I catch myself in a tunnel, I initially think to myself, okay, wait a minute. How am I here right now? Didn't I do things correctly this time? Didn't I make the necessary changes and sacrifices? What was the point in abstaining from all of those things that I take pleasure in just to avoid this pain if I was just gonna end up here anyway? Wow. I guess this was really all for nothing. And then I get caught up in the feelings of anger, resentment, despair, and apathy, and I think to myself, well, fine. If it's all pointless anyway, bring on the junk food. You know what? I don't need to work out today, or write a script, or exert any effort towards any of my aspirations whatsoever. And just like that, I start to give up. But what I'm hoping is that by learning to shift my focus from avoidance to acceptance, I can bypass that entire inner monologue. If I can learn to accept that I will inevitably end up in one of these tunnels, hopefully that monologue will go from, wow, this was all for nothing, to, yeah, this is what we were preparing for. Because I know that working out and eating healthy makes me feel better. And when I feel better, I'm more willing to write scripts and make videos that allow me to express my negative emotions, which helps me to move past them more quickly. And all of that should help me to deal with these tunnels more effectively. So ultimately, I think the first step that I need to try to take is to shift my focus from avoidance to acceptance. But like I said, I don't think this is an out and out solution, but it is an undeniable difference in how my sister and I approach these tunnels that has resulted in very different behaviors between us. Again, her behaviors are ones that I aspire to, whereas my behaviors are ones that I need to do away with. So I think this perspective change is at least worth trying out. Besides, I don't think a simple change in approach is going to quote unquote fix all of my issues in dealing with these tunnels. These tunnels are very real, very intense, and very painful. And I think it's going to take a lot more than a perspective change to wholesale deal with them. But I do think and hope that this is a start. And if it doesn't work, then I'll make another video about my failures and try something else. But yeah, at the very least, we're gonna start here and see how it goes. But anyway, I think that's gonna be it for this one. If you watched this far, I can't thank you enough for hearing me out. I truly appreciate it, and I hope whatever tunnels you go through in the future are short and have a light at the end of them. Again, I'm not here to say whether they all do or don't, but I sincerely hope that yours do. But with that said, I wish you all the very best going forward. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Peace, and be easy.